All right, again, I'm Jeff Myers. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. And I want to get our panel discussion started. And I'll begin by introducing the moderator, John Caupert. I've known John for a long time. He's from Pinckneyville, Illinois, and another Southern Illinois graduate that we're very happy to have back here on campus. John is the director of the National Corn-to-Ethanol Research Center at the SIU Research Park, SIU Edwardsville Research Park, University Park it's called, in Edwardsville, Illinois. John's responsibilities include administration and strategic direction of the NCERC. John oversees funding of the NCERC as well as coordination of staff, community and industry interaction, and outreach. John received a BS in Agribusiness Economics and an MS in Agribusiness Economics and Agricultural Policy from SIU here in Carbondale. And John's 20-year history includes commodities, fermentation, and the ethanol industry, and is complemented by his upbringing on a grain and livestock farm in Southern Illinois, again, Pinckneyville. And John and his wife, Jody, are the proud parents of their daughter, Jane Ann, who resides in Waterloo, Illinois. So, John, let's turn it over to you to kick off the panel.
All right, thanks much, Jeff. It is always great to come home. In addition to having both my bachelor's and master's from down here at Carbondale, I'm the current president of the College of Ag Science Alumni Board of Governors, and I was doing the calculations over lunch. Me and my 10 immediate family members, we have 19 undergraduate and graduate degrees from down here at Carbondale. I think Saluki Way should have been named Caupert Way, but that's another story for another day. On that side of the room, feel free to move over here if you want. We won't yell at you, spit at you, or throw anything at you because there's not going to be anything up there on that board. So if you want to get a little bit more cozy, come over here. This panel was slated to be 90 minutes. I absolutely promise you we will not go over 3 o'clock. I take great pride in keeping things on time, so I'm going to draw out the whip on my panelists if we go over. And the way that we'll keep on time is we'll keep our comments brief, and we may just cut out a question or two that were intended. The main thing that I'd like to do as the moderator of this panel is make this interactive, to hear questions from you folks that we can address to the best of our ability. But without further ado, I'd like to spend just a moment or two introducing the subject matter for the panel, and then I'm going to go right down the line, brief introductions of each panelist, and then have each of them do a 3 to 5 minute opening as well. But this panel is titled Leveraging Knowledge and Technology Resources for Sustainable Prosperity. I want to focus on the two key words in that phrase, sustainability and prosperity. Sustainability is defined as the capacity to endure through renewal, maintenance, and sustenance. At a 2005 World Summit, it was noted that in order for a technology to be sustainable, it must meet the 3 E's: economic demand, environmental reconciliation, and social equity. Prosperity is defined as the state of flourishing, thriving, good fortune, and success. But a couple questions immediately come to mind. Does sustainability and prosperity, do they go hand in hand? And in order to be sustainable, must a technology first prosper? Well, the Rocky Mountain Institute in Boulder and Snowmass, Colorado says that in order to be sustainable, you must actually abandon the idea of prosperity. I represent the biofuels industry. In 2004 and 2005, I was the first ever staff lead of the National Corn Growers Association on a biofuels development team. I was there and I helped write, along with the George W. Bush administration, the 2005 Energy Bill, which contained the first renewable fuel standard. The 2005 Energy Bill had a mandate for biofuels that, for all practical purposes, was a corn-ethanol mandate. Our industry, we prospered for approximately 5 years after the passage of that bill. Our industry prospered. Today, not so much. Due to both political unrest, compounded by market uncertainty, certain segments of the biofuels industry are striving to simply be sustainable. And this is unfortunate, because the unfortunate combination of political unrest and market uncertainty has made it difficult for advanced biofuels. A couple of the questions that were submitted ask about cellulosic ethanol and advanced biofuels, particularly in Southern Illinois. But because of this political unrest compounded by market uncertainty, it's made it difficult for advanced biofuels, particularly for cellulosic ethanol, to gain a foothold in the commercial marketplace. Markets policy, politics, and a whole number of other issues this panel is going to address. But what I'd like to do is go right down the line, beginning with a good friend of mine to my immediate right, Dr. Ken Anderson. Many of us heard from him this morning. Ken, 2 to 3 minutes of opening comments, if you could, please.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the invitation to be on this panel. As John said, my name is Ken Anderson. I'm a professor here at SIU. I'm also CTO, Chief Technology Officer for one of the spin-off companies out of SIU, and I talked a little bit about that this morning. The first thought that came to mind when I was given this topic was, rats, never accept an invitation until you know what the topic is. This is not an easy topic. There are a lot of aspects to it that are difficult to define. The first one is sustainability, and John had a crack at it. I'll approach it from a slightly different angle. The question of sustainability is about balance. It's about bringing resource consumption into balance with resource availability. That applies to energy, it applies to water, it applies to food, it applies to any particular criterion you want to apply it to, but it's all about bringing things into balance. Right now, we don't do that. Right now, we live in a way, and our lifestyles are based on the idea of consuming resources that aren't necessarily replaceable. And so the idea of achieving sustainability means changing our lifestyles. That we can do, but what we will not accept, I think, is changing our lifestyles and sacrificing our quality of life. So the idea of reaching sustainable prosperity means changing our lifestyles without giving up our quality of life that we've come to expect. And the question of how you accomplish that, to me, is all about innovation. We need sustained innovation in order to reach sustainability. Without that continuous innovation, we will not reach sustainability. And we'll discuss this as we go through the panel, but the last point I want to make in the introduction is that in order to have sustainable innovation, you need a sustainable supply of innovators. And right now, I think, particularly in Illinois, but throughout the US, we're not necessarily doing the things we need to do to make sure that we're training people, training them well, bringing them up to world-class standards, and making sure that they can have rewarding, productive careers in science and technology. I think we're doing a lot to discourage that, and I think that will work against us if we don't change that.
Thanks, Ken. To Ken's right is someone that I've known for a number of years. Vicki Gonzalez is with the Nidus Center in St. Louis. We occasionally have the opportunity to interact at a quarterly meeting called Bio St. Louis. Vicki, some opening comments, please.
Yeah, I would like to start by just talking a little bit about what I do right now, just as an introduction. And I'm actually with an organization called Nidus Partners. We're a limited partnership. And it is a partnership between corporations and entrepreneurs. And our whole focus is to find innovative technologies in the energy sector. And I mentioned that. One of the really fun things about the partnership is we're paid by our corporate partners, Monsanto, Novozymes, and Bunge, to go find really innovative technologies, and because they want to see what's out there. And we do that on a global basis, and we're very pleased that we've done that here at Carbondale. But the reason that our corporate partners got into this partnership is because all three of them, and they're in the ag space predominantly, but they feel very strongly that the energy policy, or lack thereof, here in the United States is a huge risk for their businesses. And they're not the only ones. As we go out and talk to a lot of corporations, the issue around not having a long-term energy policy means that these big corporations that are impacted, whether through the use, whether it's biomass conversion, whether it's ethanol business, however it might be impacted, if you don't know how that's going to change on a year-to-year or every 4-year basis, there's no sustainable policy, then they're looking for ways to make sure they have some technologies in their back pocket that can address issues that come up as things change in the United States. So Nidus Partners is all about finding technologies and helping our corporate partners manage the energy risks that they see on a global basis. So it's a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to this topic, and I think there's a lot to discuss.
Thank you, Vicki. It's great to have you down here in Carbondale. Shannon, who I'm meeting for the first time today, but nonetheless great to have her here. Shannon, some opening comments, please.
Yeah, thank you. I'm an architect, and so within our profession, we've been really looking and facing the issue of energy from multiple levels. And my particular area of interest has been in the interface of how mobility, or how we move, and how we build our environments, is directly impacted by energy, and then has a tremendous impact on our energy use. So it's the linkages between our, let's say, automobiles at this moment, and what the automobile has, how it has helped us, as well as how it has hindered us. Here in Southern Illinois, we have a wonderful experience of not dealing with traffic, but if you are to go to the west or the east coast or certain places, you can literally just be sitting in a parking lot on an interstate at this point in time. So these areas have been driving tremendous innovation in new mobility devices, and quite frankly, the rest of the world is way ahead of us right now. They are moving forward. They are putting these new transit and automobiles into their public ways for many different purposes, including India. I just came back from India. And here in the United States, we are, for some reason, dragging our feet in terms of being willing to look at some of these advanced technologies. I think it was really fascinating that he brought up Skytran, which is one of the technologies that I've been looking at, because I look at a broad spectrum of technologies in terms of transportation and how they're going to impact our built world. So it's very exciting for me as an architect to come and learn from all of you who are the primary innovators usually, and then I'm looking at your innovations and seeing how they can further impact how we all live, so that we do achieve this notion that I firmly believe in, that we have to change our lifestyle, but we don't want to change our quality of life. And I think there are solutions, many of them already out there, and we need to start to experiment and embrace these. And I think SIU is positioned, because of the our new transportation building and our automotive and our airport department, to become very active with these new technologies. There's only 3 other universities right now that I'm aware of very active with these new technologies. That is Carnegie Mellon, MIT, and Stanford. And it would be great if we could start to position ourselves down here in Southern Illinois.
Very good. Well, this is going to be a fun panel, and the main thing that I really want to do over this next 53 minutes or so that we have left is make this an opportunity for each of you to ask the questions that are on your minds, the questions, the comments. There's probably even some concerns out there. If you do have a question, one of the things I'd like you to do is tell us who you are. You know, I'm Joe Smith with the Southern Illinoisan. And then I don't know if there is a Joe Smith at the Southern Illinois, but it kind of worked. But and anyway, then direct the question to whichever panelist you'd like to direct it to. But I'm going to go ahead and tee it up, because there were a number of great comments made in the openings here. I'm with Shannon. I certainly do share a bit of a bias for all things Southern Illinois. And it's not just because I grew up in Southern Illinois and my background is in Southern Illinois, but I agree with her. You know, Southern Illinois is abundant in natural resources, agricultural resources, coal, everything that we heard about. Southern Illinois University is unique in the fact that we have the Coal Research Center at Carbondale, we have the Biofuels Research Center up at SIU Edgersville. It just seems to me like we are perfectly positioned to address this question of sustainable technology, particularly in this energy space, moving forward. The center, which I'm a director of, which is a building not a whole lot unlike this, other than there are a number of laboratories in there, a biofuels pilot plant. Over the last 6 years, we've had nearly 180 different technologies that have passed through our building. More than 50 of those are now out in the commercial marketplace. It's technologies that a partnership such as Vicki's would take a look at. that being said, the first question I want to get a comment from each one of the panelists is very broad, but that is, how does a technology, whatever that technology may be, how does it play a role? How does that specific technology play a role in achieving this idea of sustainable prosperity? And I'll start with Ken for comments and go right on down the line. Ken?
Define the question for me a little better. What technology are you talking about? How does technology as a whole?
That's what happens when you take questions off of Facebook. You got to pick a technology. Pick yours. One that the biofuels industry is interested in from a biomass conversion standpoint. So we'll use your technology.
Technology as a whole, our prosperity is based on technology. For the last 200 years or so since the Industrial Revolution, we've built our economies, we've built a world, we've built a society around the axle of technology. If we're going to change the way in which we use technology in order to make our technology more sustainable, we're going to have new technologies. It's as simple as that. We can't just say, okay, we're going to make what we've got now and make it sustainable, because it's not. We can't keep doing what we're doing now. We're going to have to change. The question is, and the multi-billion-dollar question is, what do we change to? And that's not well defined yet. This is why I was commenting earlier that what we need is this real influx of innovation coming into our space, where we can then pick and choose from those innovations to decide which are the ones that are going to allow us to achieve sustainability without sacrificing our quality of life.
Very good. Vicki, you may have a little bit of a different perspective on this, because those partners that you identified, while I'm certain that it's important to them to have, this cleaner, greener, environmentally friendly economy, those three companies, those are for-profit companies. So at the end of the day, they're looking at a bottom line, and in some cases, that they have stockholders that are interested in that. So when your partnership is evaluating these technologies, what are they looking for?
Yeah, well, so first of all, broadly speaking, there's not going to be a single solution to sustainable prosperity. It is going to take a plethora of technologies. And to your point, every corporation that we have talked to who is and they're all very committed to green sustainability. We've talked to Pepsi, we've talked to Coke. They want to get the biorenewable bottles out there. But the bottom line is they are not willing to pay more for it. So you either have to have cost parity with what's currently on the market, or a performance advantage, just like any other technology that you might want to introduce. And so when we're evaluating technologies in this energy space, our business models and financial models look at it from the perspective of, this can't be profitable on subsidies. And so, because you won't get any money invested into your company to develop it if the only way you're going to be profitable is through a government subsidy. And the reason is, you never know when that government subsidy is going to stop. Again, this goes to a long-term policy. And I'll just say one last thing. We have a company that has got a government grant actually in Denmark to do a demonstration project. In Denmark, they have an energy policy which by 2050 they want to have 50% of their electricity from wind. And that has been in place for a while. And obviously it's a goal that people are committed to. And when you've got that long-term commitment and it's there, then you can actually develop these technologies knowing that there's a market and there's an end game. So. Very
good. Shannon, at lunch, we heard the term LEED and LEED certified. Some of us may not know what that even means. You're an architect, so define for us LEED, and then from a LEED perspective, what's necessary for a technology to be sustainable in this environment of LEED certified?
Well, LEED certified is a system where you rate a building on its energy use ultimately. but it has many other aspects structured within its requirements. So you get what are called lead points, depending upon if you have met certain standards. The largest proportion of this is based on mechanical systems, because buildings have a tremendous energy use. After transportation, it's buildings. And the AIA has its own goal, which I don't know if you're aware of, by 2030, that all of our buildings will be net zero energy, meaning that we are trying to achieve that if we build a building, it sustains itself with its own energy. So it doesn't look beyond a building, because right now that's a fairly worthwhile, achievable goal by 2030. That's not necessarily a part of LEED, but LEED has some very specific steps that help to start to reach that sort of a very lofty goal. But now LEED also goes off into many other areas, such as transportation, such as water resources, and also has special credits for innovation, interestingly enough. So there are some the majority of LEED is very prescribed, and you earn points, and depending how many points you earn, you either become gold or platinum, and you can get a plaque for your building. And you work from the very beginning of the design process. But several of the points that you can earn are for innovation, where you are starting to look at new strategies that are even more successful than what they've benchmarked. So they have benchmarks you can reach in terms of, let's say, energy reduction. So it's an interesting process for building owners that choose to go through it. It's not a free process. You pay to become part of the process. It also involves a great deal of cost issues, such as energy modeling and post-occupancy type evaluations, to see if your building is indeed performing to the standards that you're interested in. But I wanted to say something, because I think this whole issue is fascinating to me, because of the interest I have of both transportation and architecture. There really isn't one notion of prosperity or sustainability, even in any one. Well, in Denmark, maybe it could be a little bit more focused, but certainly in the United States, I've had the good fortune to work in different parts and teach in different parts of the country, and the challenges are vastly different. And what I find fascinating is to think about the notion in multiple ways. So how could we become sustainable as a community, and what technologies could help us as a community of people here in Southern Illinois have sustainable prosperity for ourselves, as well as how could we as a group here in Southern Illinois think about helping people with challenges that we don't face achieve sustainable prosperity because of the resources or because of the skills that we have here in Southern Illinois that have disappeared from the majority of the rest of the country. Mm-hmm. And basically those are those skills that are learned on a farm. You may not stop and think about this, but the skills learned as growing up on a farm and being on a farm, I think the last census said we have less than 5% of our population that are farmers now. And I don't know what the statistics are, but I gather to say most of them are here in Southern Illinois, or a huge proportion of them are here in Illinois. And so there's a tremendous skill set that is learned that is fast disappearing from our country, that is beneficial to technology, if I could wrap and tie my thoughts all together for you.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Before we go to questions from the audience, one more that I have. We all know that it's an election year. In fact, I made a commitment to my wife just yesterday morning that in our household, for the next 19 days, no more CNN, MSNBC, or Fox News. So I guess I'm going to read a lot over the next 3 weeks. But that being said, the next question that I want to toss right down the line here is really one that's based on policy. My industry, biofuels, it's been somewhat of a policy-driven industry. After the 2005 energy bill, we then passed the 2007 energy bill. Within that bill, it called for 36 billion gallons of renewable fuels, the majority of which would be these advanced biofuels and cellulosic ethanol by the year 2022. And again, this really created a rapid investment in startup companies. Our center is a nonprofit. The overwhelming majority of the clientele that we serve in the private sector are startup companies that the world has never heard of, more often than not supported by venture capitalists. Well, something happened in 2012 that not only swept across the Midwest, but swept across the entire country. What was it? What did we have this year, the most major one we've had in decades?
Drought.
The drought. Absolutely right. And it has put a great big bullseye on biofuels, predominantly because when we think biofuels, we still think corn being converted into ethanol. Because of that, 154 members of the United States Congress, they got together, they submitted a letter to Lisa Jackson, the director of the Environmental Protection Agency, calling for a waiver of this thing called the Renewable Fuel Standard. When that happened, ladies and gentlemen, our clientele stopped dead in their tracks, and the investment community said, let's wait and see how this shakes out. So my question then to the other panelists is then, how does policy at a state and federal level, how does that impact investment into new technology? Starting with Ken and then down the line. Ken?
I'll echo what's already been said. Stable policies, long-term planning, long-term goals so we know what we're aiming for is what we need. And the lack of that is devastating us. It applies in the example you gave, it applies across technology space. I've seen it in all sorts of different examples. We could all rattle down the list and go off half a dozen or more like that, I'm sure. What we have become is very short-sighted, almost myopic in our view looking towards the future. And we can't move forward until we can get a long-term view, set long-term targets, and then we know what we're aiming for. Investors will come in, technology will get involved and get developed to meet those targets. But so long as the target is vague, we're dead in the water.
Vicki, what are you hearing out of the corporate environment evaluating technologies during this somewhat political uncertainty around biofuels right now?
Can I say ditto and save time? It's the whole reason these corporate partners are in the partnership. I mean, there is without a stable policy, they're not going to invest their time. You've seen it in wind. Every wind farm is trying to get in their last piece of equipment before the end of 2012 when all of those subsidies go away. And so, when you've got that kind of flux in the system, no venture capital, I can tell you, will invest. Corporate might be a little bit different because corporate's trying to protect their bottom line. And so they will invest to try to protect and manage risk. But a VC is in there to make money. Not that the corporate's not, but it's just a different reason to invest in a new startup or a new technology.
So Shannon, if you say ditto, that means I've got ditto heads. That means I'm comparable to Rush Limbaugh, and I'm not sure I'm going to be there.
I'm not going to say ditto because the technologies that I've been working with that are starting to thrive in terms of transportation technologies in London, in India, in South Korea, in Sweden. In fact, our federal government has just signed a letter of agreement with Sweden, and I'm missing a conference there because it's fascinating. Is actually looking at movement technologies that don't rely on any type of fuel, right? They're electric or solar powered, and they're being constructed now. And it's amazing what's happening out there. It's truly amazing. And our government almost in California with the San Benito Airport, almost with the city of San Jose, put in place a structure to bring one of these new devices and test it and set up a test area around the San Benito Airport, but that has kind of gotten very quiet, so I don't know what's happening. So it's ditto in the sense that we don't have, we're not forming goals, and but yet I would disagree. There is a lot of technology out there. A lot of people. I was very involved this summer with the people with automated vehicles. that's pretty Google driven. And these people are amazing. And one way to say, well, why do I want what difference is it going to make if my car is automated versus whether I drive it? But there's lots of incremental change that can happen by changing a device that way, versus the bigger change that's happening in other countries with vehicles that are on automated transit networks. And they're just completely driverless. They're already out there functioning completely driverless. They're point to point. They improve your quality of life. They're less expensive. They meet all the criteria you all talked about, and we still can't get people in the United States to engage around even a test area for them. It's really fascinating.
Question, Jeff, from right over here. Name, rank, serial number, and who your questions to, please.
Sure. My name's Joey Mack, and I'm with the Illinois Department of Commerce, so I might be one of the only government people in this room. And this is actually really fascinating to hear your thoughts on this. Something that you guys keep talking about is the need for stability, the need for long-term policies, long-term goals, which I think is something that from the government side we definitely support, and that's something we strive for. The problem is, what happens when the next guy's in power and I get fired? So knowing that politics or politicians and the policies that they put forth are always subject to change with every election cycle, what do we, not as government folks, not as academics or private sector stakeholders, but what do we as a community of taxpayers need to do collectively to continue building towards that ecosystem that spurs innovation, that sets long-term goals in spite of those political realities?
I'm going to go right down the line on this one too, and ask for comments from everybody. By the way, Joey, Ted Berger was in my building just last week. I think he'd been on the job for about a week as the new legislative director for DCO. Tell Jonathan Feipel next time you see him. So that's a great point. Our center, we do work not only across the nation but across the globe. And we're watching this election this year very, very closely for reasons specific to what you said. Now, the biofuels industry is fortunate in that not only has President Obama and the current administration been very, very supportive, but our industry was very excited a couple weeks ago when Governor Romney came out. So I'm speaking here on a national level. But when Governor Romney came out and also endorsed and stated his support for the renewable fuel standard. So we feel on a national level we're okay no matter what. Well, that's the White House. And the White House is only as good as what Congress puts in front of them. So we are gravely concerned about these 154 members of Congress that not only want to see the renewable fuel standard waived, they want to see it abolished. They want to roll us back to where we were a decade ago. Our industry is focused on job creation. More than 487,000 jobs have been created in the last 7 years because of the renewable fuel standard. We've decreased imports of foreign oil, sometimes from countries that don't like us very much, by nearly 20%. The economic stimulus has been a boom. Nearly $60 billion is contributed annually to the GDP. So we're happy to see that both the current president and his challenger have endorsed the renewable fuel standard. Ken?
The biggest thing that I think, there are two issues here that you raise. One is the instability of the political process where it keeps turning over, and that's not going to change. And the other part of your question was, what can communities do to prepare and how can we foster this? The biggest thing that communities can do is being willing to embrace change. That's it. Change is coming. Communities need to be prepared for that, and locally we need to be willing to be adaptable and changeable. That's really what it's about. Now, at the government end, I'm not sure I completely agree that the fact that we have a 4-year political cycle is inherently the problem, because we have in the past committed ourselves to long-term goals and achieved them. And I think the current political mess that we're in right now isn't something that we're necessarily stuck with. I think that system isn't the problem. I think it's just right now we're not doing it very well. And I'll echo something that Shannon said before. When the comments I made about us not having long-term goals. I was talking about the US. Other countries definitely have set long-term goals, are working on long-term plans and implementing them. And we're just not doing that here in the States very well. So I think the political process is with us to stay, but the system itself isn't broken, it's just the way we're implementing it.
Vicki?
Yeah, I do think that communities can do a lot. And I think people who are developing technologies, can think about it in terms of a house, a building, a city. And I think we're starting to see a lot more technologies being developed and implemented in those ways. And when you do that, you actually have a choice as a community. We in the Midwest pay the cheapest electricity cost of anyone in the United States. And yet, you hear people complaining about CO2 and dirty coal. But we've got it pretty good. And we've got to start making the choices about, well, are we willing to spend a little bit more to clean up a little bit? We're not going to get away from coal, and I think coal is a good thing, but solar is a good thing, and wind is a good thing. And we as a communities need to make a decision about, being willing to pay a little bit more for sustainability and prosperity long term. And I think you can do that on a small community basis.
Now, I was going to say, I'm glad Vicki said that, because I was going to bring up examples like Chattanooga, when small communities take it within themselves to act. And, if you study what's happened in Chattanooga, Tennessee over the last 12 years, what an amazing transformation has happened there. Their internet is even locally provided from their electric company, and it's I was told, I haven't had a chance to verify this, so if I'm wrong, somebody tell me, but I was just recently told it was the fastest internet in the United States, and it's their local electric company that's providing it to the whole city, and everyone has access to it. So this city somehow managed to pull all their people together, key players together, and had a vision for Chattanooga. And if there was federal money that came in for some of the projects, fine. If not, fine. But they managed to leverage a vision for themselves. So it's a really kind of odd environment where everybody keeps saying think globally, act locally, right? That statement's been around for a long time, but nothing could be more powerful right now than really truly understanding that and taking a look at it. Something as simple as solar fields over top of parking lots, which has already been proven. Look at Carbondale. Look at all the parking lots we had. If we invested just in putting solar panels over all of our parking lots, what we could do for ourselves as a community in terms of assisting with energy production that could go for lots of different purposes and reasons. So you have to take a look at your local. You really have to really go local, see what you have, right? We're abundant coal, right? We're abundant with coal. We're abundant here with farming technologies. I was in Brazil fairly recently, and of course sugar is the method of choice for fuel down there. But it's interesting. It's really interesting to see that there are so many solutions. So if you get really local, and my mantra has always been high and low. Think high tech and low tech, and how do they merge? And I think we have just a tremendous abundance if we really embrace it as a local community and start just latching on to all these different ideas that will help us as a community, but also help the broader spectrum in the United States and across the world.
I actually have a follow-up from the gentleman from DCO's question. That is, my center's been very fortunate to receive a number of biofuels R&D grants through Illinois DCEO. On a national scale, the entire corn ethanol industry for the better part of a decade was receiving a tax credit of 45 cents per gallon. Now, that wasn't going to the corn ethanol producer, it was going to the fuel blender. Because of the great federal debt that we're currently carrying, the corn ethanol industry approached Congress this past year and said, you know what, we think we've had enough help. We're going to give you your $5.5 billion annually back and use it somewhere else. So that begs the question, at both the state level and the federal level, does the government, do they need to continue to invest, if you will, in the forms of tax credits for startups and new technologies, or have they done their part? Ken?
In the terms of tax credits, I would say no. I don't think by the time we get to the stage where an industry is well enough developed to be existing on that scale, I would say no. I think the government does have a role in supporting R&D, and particularly very innovative R&D, high-risk R&D that a lot of the commercial groups don't necessarily take advantage of. So I think there is a role for government in the R&D space, but I think once technologies are out there, they're mature enough to be playing in the commercial sector, I don't think that subsidies need to be in place, at least not for very long. Help new technologies get started, but then once they get started, let the market decide who the winners and losers are.
Yeah, go right ahead. You can jump right in. Wait for the mic for just a second from Amy, if you don't mind. Name, rank, serial number, please.
Tom Dersh Energy.
Okay.
It seems to me when we talk about subsidies or government support for something or whatever, we need to come up with a system that puts a dollar value on energy technologies that are cleaner, healthier, and more sustainable from a supply availability standpoint. And in other words, we need market mechanisms that come into the pricing of these products, so that a technology such as corn, ethanol from corn, or from biomass or what have you, that it has a greater opportunity to be cost competitive, and that subsidy is based on something because it is renewable, it is sustainable. The other technology just oil. We're going to deplete it. We're eventually going to run out of it. We're going to be attractive. So I think that there could be an argument made for some type of systematic approach that rewards technologies that are sustainable. 1, 2, that are cleaner, and 2, that are healthier. And one way to look at this is the timber industry. The timber industry, they have basically a rule. You cut down a tree, you replant a tree. Okay, so that keeps their industry sustainable. They're allowed to do that, they're able to do that. But when it comes to coal and oil and natural gas, there's no replanting oil, there's no replanting that coal, there's no replanting the natural gas or what have you. And so there needs to be a mechanism by which they either pay more by way of, say, a severance tax or what have you, or the other technologies are rewarded comparably so that we don't eventually run out, that we have a sustainable program. Because ultimately, this innovation that we need has to be funded. Something has to drive this, and there has to be market mechanisms to do that. That's why subsidy, if it's part of a program that recognizes its advantage to us as a society long term, I don't have a problem with that. But if it's just flat out just subsidize it forever, just for the heck of subsidizing it, sure. But if it's actually based on something like that, then no. And one other thing is imports. We import a lot of products to this country, and they are being manufactured under some very questionable environmental sets of standards. And so their advantage, they have a big advantage on us, who when we try to manufacture something, we try to do it in a much cleaner way, more healthy way. Well, if we're going to make it a level playing field, then we need to, again, either do something positive for those of us who are doing it more healthy, or we need to penalize those who are not doing it so healthy in the way of some kind of import fee or something like that. There has to be market mechanisms. So there is, I think a term was used a while ago, cost comparative, or cost comparative. And so that's the nature of my concern when you said just in general eliminate subsidies.
So I want to start with Vicki first on this, and kind of address, because I think these are some of the issues, if you will, that maybe some of your corporate partners look kind of this risk reward, or more so from an award standpoint. So Vicki, can you address a couple of those points, and then we'll go to Shannon.
Well, I think it's a great idea. Yeah, I think it's an important idea. I'm going to step back from a technology standpoint and give you just an example. We've got a technology that converts CO2 and renewable electricity to natural gas. And in the U.S., that obviously with the prices of natural gas doesn't make a lot of sense. But in countries in Europe where they have a lot of extra wind energy that's not going back on the grid and CO2, converting it to natural gas allows them to store it and use it. There are subsidies for what they call, because you're using CO2 and wind energy, it's considered renewable natural gas. And there are subsidies for that. There's a premium in the market in Europe for that product. For us, this technology is so early that premium is important. It's important because it gives us a little bit of a leg up, just as you were talking about, in trying to demonstrate and get this technology on the market. But one of the things that is very critical to us is that technology at some point has to be able to stand on its own without that credit. And early on, having that credit's really important because it takes a lot of money to get a new technology commercialized. There's no doubt about it. And, if there's not some stable policies or some advantage, it is hard to get people to invest in new technologies. So having those early on in a technology life cycle is great. But I will continue to emphasize that at some point the market has to bear out that product or that technology has to compete with what's currently on the market. And so, but I like your idea. I'd love to implement it.
Shannon, quick comment from you, and then we got a question way back here in the
Yeah,
far
I'd like
far
to
corner.
comment because a lot of the things that I work with, like transit, which, we have some level of transit here in Southern Illinois, but I'm thinking more of the larger transit systems you'll see in New York City or the Baltimore, Washington area, large metro trains. I mean, those are, they can only function with complete support. And, in increasing their ridership so that they would become more self-sustaining would be a really good thing, especially because of the challenges that are faced in those areas. But because of the complexities of lifestyle in the United States, there are lots of challenges out there in terms of sustainable solutions that we want to try to move to, that while they may not decrease someone's quality of life, our perception is that they will decrease our quality of life. So there are still lots of layers out there that challenge us and are challenge policy in dealing with some thought processes. And then of course solar is always an issue because at this point, as of yet, even if you're just focusing on a building, your cost, your payback for that, is still not. It's not quite there.
Very good. Question way back here in the far corner.
Of course, I have a microphone. I feel like I should say something. But assistant professor of management here at SIU. But I'm also working with DOE's Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, looking at their efforts to build and strengthen supply chains in photovoltaics, and so Solinda and B123, you heard these names, and both the panelists, two of the panelists have talked about helping out until the market intervenes. But can you also mention that governments have got to play a role? And if we talk about markets, we're not talking just about a national market, we're talking about an international market. And the story with EV in particular is that the reason why so India and all these other domestic-based EV companies are having problems is because China is flooding the market by subsidizing heavily those manufacturers. So I'm with you in terms of the rhetoric of letting the market take over, but when is that point? I guess, and that's the difficulty we're having in helping the DOE trying to figure these things out. And of course, they're in the fire, they're idiots because it's limited and all sorts of things. But they're of the same mind you are. They want to help and let the technology market wants to adopt these things. But where is that point, especially in this type of international globalized marketplace?
Yeah, that's a great point. A good friend of ours, Sarah Blackwood, has just moved from the office of Congressman Costello over to DOE. She's the legislative director of that DOE EERE program. I'll be seeing her in a couple weeks. I go back to the point that I made earlier, and then I'll get comments from each one of the panelists. The renewable fuel standard being under attack. I think there is absolutely no chance. I think I stand a better chance of being able to dunk a basketball, and I'm 5'7" and 45 years old. I think there's a better chance of that happening than the renewable fuel standard being waived, simply because of the political fallout that would happen from that. That being said, what happens after next January when the new Congress is sworn in, we are concerned about that. Because a waiver or major changes to the renewable fuel standard that would alter by any great extent this call for ramp up of advanced biofuels could set this country back decades in terms of energy dependence. So I certainly share your thought and your agreement on that. And Ken and Vicki and Shannon will go right down the line for comments from each of you.
I guess where I'm going with the position that I've taken is based on my experience in the past, where when governments get involved in trying to pick winners and to define solutions, it doesn't work out real well. And the government's role should be in setting standards and then letting the market determine how those standards are met. And the classic example that I can think of from my early career when I worked in the oil industry was the government came out and said, we need to improve the emissions from automobile engines. There's too much emissions coming out of the tailpipe of a car, so we're going to do that by introducing oxygenates into gasoline. And they said, the one to go with is MTBE. And I worked at Amoco at the time, and Amoco said, we're not going to invest a nickel in MTBE because it's going to be a disaster. We'll buy MTBE on the spot market as long as we're forced to do so, but MTBE is going to be a catastrophe. There are lots better ways to achieve this without using MTBE. And sure enough, 2 years later, MTBE was being banned. Yeah, because what was happening was, instead of saying, you need to accomplish this goal, the government was saying, this is how you need to get to this point. And there are lots of clever innovators, lots of clever people out there who can say, I can think of a dozen different ways to get to that end point. And subsidies carry too long. And I agree with Vicki, in the early stages, getting things going and getting an industry established, they're fine up to a point. And I can't answer your absolute question of when that point is. But they have a role up to a point. But once they get beyond that point, then they're just saying, well, we've chosen this industry is going to win over these others. And that's not how you find the best solutions. Let innovators come in and find the best way to get to the goal. Don't define the path that has to be taken.
Very good. Vicki?
Yeah. So we're not going to fix the problem with China. We, as a country, I think, though, are much more innovative than China. I think that is the strength that we bring. And so my position on this really is we've got to let the markets pull the technology that's going to have the best chance of success, knowing that there are some disadvantages out there, but we're not going to close our markets because this is a global society and we have to be global. There certainly needs to be some creative thinking and government grants are fabulous. I think corporates could get more involved in the very early stages of technology as well, to get things commercialized. But it's really going to be our own innovation that provides the competitive advantage that we're going to have to find.
Shannon?
Yeah, it's absolutely the case. I mean, I became very fascinated with when he mentioned the company, the Bloom Energy. But what happens from our perspective, or my perspective as an architect, I'm one of the few architects on the Transportation Research Board. There aren't architects there. So they're planners, they're engineers, but they're not architects. And one would say, well, what do you really need the architect for? They just make a pretty building. But that's really not what we do. And so we would, and pardon me, it's hard for me to find a way to phrase this, but we're trained to think intensely spatially. Now, not that other disciplines aren't spatial, that's not what I'm implying. But our profession is trained to think spatially in terms of our built environment, which is very, very complex. And we've now reached the point where a lot of these technologies, okay, maybe they will be very useful in one arena, but not in any way help us address another very serious problem. But maybe another technology can address both of them. And that sort of very combinatory thinking is still not really happening yet, which can also help to make analysis of seeing how technology prosper. And often when you just put them out on the market, and there's nothing wrong with that, they can find a niche market where they will be very successful, but then maybe it catches on, but then it doesn't really solve the other major problems. And of course, I keep mentioning the East and West Coast in terms of traffic. So there's just, at this point, layers of issues that when you look at them as a system, as a whole interlocking system, it becomes really fascinating about technology and ways to think about technology and what they can do.
Very good. So we're starting to run shy on time. Any other questions right now from this gentleman right over here? Name, rank, serial number. Let us know who you are. 575. Okay, very good.
Hi, this is Jesus Ponce. I have a consulting business in Carbondale. My business is in Asia, Mexico, U.S. It's on Australian technology. And as I travel and talk about sustainable technology, I wonder, it's more of a comment for general reaction for all of them, is you go to Singapore and you see Singapore solve the traffic problem a long time ago with technology. They can direct traffic, they can fine, they can tell you ahead of time what street is blocked, which one is not, etc. Then you have Hong Kong developing now in Kowloon City in Hong Kong, a new city completely on top of the old city, where even the city is going to have a double elevated system of MRT, metro. So all of these technologies are out there for sustainability. There is one more example in Mexicali, in Tijuana. Outside Tijuana is a company called Urbi. Is developing a 500,000 city, all self-sustainable. And they have 80% recyclable water. They have electricity from solar. Once you walk into the city, the buses immediately link into the Wi-Fi in the bus. So all of these things are out there. And to the DC area, most of the time the new technologies are always underperforming and don't have a ROI that pays back. So always is either an entrepreneur, or is the government, or who's going to be putting all this together to help us move into a sustainable society.
So I think in there more than anything, there was probably a comment more than a question. And what I got from that is that, we're seeing it around the world, whether it's a community, a country, or a continent. Some are making the decisions to do these things. So maybe just a very brief reply from each one of the panelists on his comments.
Yeah, you're right. People are doing this in other places around the world, and it could be done here, but it isn't happening.
Vicky?
I
Ditto.
agree. I mean, you go down to Brazil and they have ethanol. That is their transportation fuel. And part of it, though, is the infrastructure. We have a very old, very capital-intensive infrastructure for most of our energy and transportation. And new technologies coming in mean that you have to invest in changing that infrastructure, which is generally a lot of capital. If you can't figure out how that works within the current infrastructure, you're right, there's not an ROI, and then you have to figure out who's going to pay for it. So again, it goes back to kind of we as a nation deciding we want to change the infrastructure, and therefore we want to bring in some new technologies that can be managed. But in the meantime, we've got to find technologies that fit within the infrastructure of the United States.
Shannon?
Well, that's always a complicated topic because, again, it becomes very local. It just becomes intensely local. But you are correct about infrastructure. So I know it sounds odd, but I studied the parking garage. People are like, what? I mean, what could you write about a parking garage? Well, I wrote 300 pages about a parking garage because it actually, it wasn't the car moving that created who we are in the United States. It was the car at rest. It was where we had to put the car when it stopped. And Europe, because of their infrastructure in the late 1800s, early 1900s, couldn't absorb the car everywhere. So we're at the point, if I could make that analogy, to where the Europeans were in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And so, yeah, we have to we have to really look at things a little bit differently. And there are transitional technologies, and there are overlapping technologies that can work with what we have. And in some places, maybe we have the freedom to do something experimental, completely new, like it's happening in the rest of the world. And amazing things happening. But when it reaches a critical issue, and I'm just going to talk about this one particular technology, it's utterly fascinating in terms of transportation. Heathrow Airport was becoming immobile. People couldn't get around Heathrow. This technology is put in. It will soon be everywhere in Heathrow to get you anywhere and everywhere you want to be. It's being put in Suncheon City, South Korea, because it's their ecological city, and they didn't want anything to touch it, people or vehicles, and the only solution was this particular transportation system. And in India, at one of their most sacred shrines, the mass of people visiting that shrine is so oppressive, even from the train station to the shrine. Basically, there was only one new technology out there that solved those three intensely disparate problems. And because of the problem being so intense in those three locations, new technology happened. It's going in because the problem had to be addressed, or Heathrow would eventually become immobile, or the South Koreans would never see their most wonderful ecological preserve. The Indian community would not be able to visit one of their most sacred religious shrines. And so there are places on this planet where people are being pushed to embrace solutions so they can keep what they love, or what functions. We haven't quite got to that point yet somewhere in the United States, but it's getting close.
So we're going to make this brief because I gave Amy my word we'd be out here at 3, and I never, ever, ever break my word. I just break somebody's leg. So let's make it real brief so we can wrap this thing up on time, John.
Okay, just one, it's more of a comment for you to comment back on. I've heard people talk about subsidies and how they impact development of new technologies.
Yeah.
One of the problems we have is we don't educate people about where subsidies already exist. There's a tremendous subsidy right now for the petroleum industry, right? If you took away the subsidy for the petroleum industry, a lot of these other technologies would become much more competitive. So if you're going to talk about markets functioning, you have to educate people. I doubt that most of the American public know the extent to which the petroleum industry is subsidized, but they certainly see these big blurbs on television about Cylindra and Corn-to-Ethanol and natural gas from electricity. We have to get much more candid in our political discussions about what facts are versus what's convenient for a particular political argument at a given time.
Good question. And
So I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
And I think from a budget standpoint, that all of those subsidies need to be on the table, public information, and we make a decision about those. That's almost just kind of a budget deficit issue at this point. But from a technology standpoint, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so to wrap up, because I think we have talked about subsidies a fair amount. Unfortunately, we didn't really get to market conditions. But what I do want to do is I want to give each panelist about 20 seconds to address what I think is the bigger part of what he said, and that is consumer awareness. And what do we need to be doing to inform and educate and motivate and advocate to the consumer? So you got 20 seconds or I'm jerking the mic. Ken?
The more educated the consumer, the more educated the population, the better.
Very good. Vicki?
Ditto? Well, I don't know. You go into the schools, you start talking about it. Yes.
Shannon?
I don't know. I don't quite know how to respond because I've been at plenty of meetings of the last 10 or 12 years and presented cheaper, better solutions, and people don't want them. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating. It's, there's a lot of layers going on here, and education doesn't always fix those layers. It's fascinating.
Well, very good. I've got 28 seconds to thank this panel. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking Ken, Vicki, and Shannon for this wonderful panel discussion.